Hello and welcome to Funded Futures. My name is Emily. I'm your host, and today I'm joined by Jeanette Cheah, who is a speaker and the co-founder and CEO of HEX, which is changing the way that we look at growth and development. Welcome to the pod.
Hi, nice to be here. Good start, Jeanette. Let's try that again. Great. Thanks for having me.
You're so welcome. Okay. Thanks so much for coming. It's such a pleasure to have you here and to actually get into what you do at HEX. I find it a really fascinating business model because, you know, you're kind of shifting that growth pathway for, you know, starting at students and also intersecting anybody who's in business or at any stage in their career. Can you give me a bit of an overview of how you came up with the idea and how it's changing the way that we look at career growth and development?
Absolutely. So HEX, as it is today, is definitely not what it was when it first started, and I can definitely bust the myth straight away that there was any kind of light bulb moment. But I'll just give you a really quick overview of what we do to start off with. And what that is we help to get young people ready for a future that's changing exponentially. We do that by supplementing the education they currently have at school and university and just really showing them the breadth and depth of opportunities that are out there. And we do that with capabilities, programs, entrepreneurship programs, all sorts of things. But when I first came up with the idea, I was still working at ANZ Bank. I was in the innovation team. I was just curious about this kind of world of entrepreneurship and startups. I'd personally done a little bit of a UX course and was like, there's other things out here that people aren't learning or being taught about. And I just sort of found this amazing community of humans that were building new things. I was like, there needs to be more of these people, more people building the kind of future they want to live in.
Absolutely. I think that that's the beauty of what you're building is you can't be what you can't see, and exposing people to potentially different careers that they never knew existed is an incredible thing to do. Whereas I think when I was at school, you were only exposed to a few career paths, and I think that it was very linear. I went to a Catholic all-girls school and there were so many careers that I had no idea about. I mean, you'd go to career counselling and they'd be like, okay, I think you should go into PR or law or medicine, and that was kind of all you could go into. And we were also limited in terms of subjects that we had. I know my brother went to an all-boys school and he got completely different subjects available to him that weren't even available.
Yeah.
And that's it. Like, you know, you need to start at the school level to really make a change. Where do you think that change needs to be implemented? How early are you approaching students?
We start working with students as young as about year 8, and then we focus in on that upper high school tertiary education sector. And then even work with people in their early careers. So I kind of call it our university age sandwich. That's the meat, and we start a little bit earlier and we go a little bit later. But I mean, I genuinely think if we're trying to build a generation of humans that are starting businesses or influencing change, they need to know that that's an option to them as early as possible. You know, when I was growing up, I lived a pretty traditional education life as well. I played the violin since I was 2 years old. I just kind of knew I was going to university. It was just a given. And I did a pretty traditional background of economics, business, and worked in corporate life for about 14 years because that's kind of what I thought was
You do not look old enough for that.
Yeah. Thanks, Mum. So, yeah, it was an interesting kind of reflection to go, well, when I was in corporate and I looked around at the people making decisions and the way that they, you know, treat their staff, the way they put policies together, the way communications and technology were handled, I kind of just had this inkling that there were other ways to do these things.
Right.
And I never felt empowered enough to necessarily make those suggestions while I was at work. And I definitely knew that there were people around me that were not living up to the potential and who had other ideas about how they wanted the world to work that they weren't making real. And so I think I've always just had this kernel of how do we help people connect their ideas, the future they want, with the skills they need, the network they need, and just the capabilities to actually make it real and just take one small step in that direction. And so I think when we plant those seeds in the minds of students as young as, you know, year 7, year 8, tell them that entrepreneurship is a legitimate career choice. Tell them that they could be the people making change in the world, not just reacting to it. the more of that we do now, the better we'll be in future generations.
So how does HEX go about intercepting I almost said kids, but it's not really kids, is it? You're intercepting young people at schools. Do you approach the schools directly? How does that work?
Yeah, so the business model at the moment is that we do work directly with schools, universities and government agencies. So really anyone who's got a vested interest in the development of young people or in economic development. And so there are certainly the occasional students or parents that just find us and enroll directly, and that's awesome. But really we think it's best to kind of get into the system through the existing players.
Okay.
So we kind of like to say that we're innovating education from the inside out. So we've come in, we've been a supportive partner to universities and schools. We've done things like make sure all of our programs have academic credit at university levels. So we're trusted enough, and we've been around long enough now that the school partners want us to be part of their curriculum or extracurricular.
Yeah, right. So can you share any stories where you've seen HEX come in and it's really affected the students and shown you that what you're doing is really making a difference?
Absolutely. So many stories. I got to tell you, one of my favorite quotes, and I don't know if other founders do this, but I like to go and, when I'm having a bad day or having a day, I go and read all the old testimonials and the comments from my students, because it kind of reminds me why we're doing the thing. And one of my favorite quotes is just a young person who wrote, "I'm not afraid of my future anymore." And that just like hit me right in the feels because it is a scary future out there. And I think if we can make a young person feel like they've got agency in that future, that's a massive win. But specifically to your point, one of my favorite examples is a young woman who was studying graphic design, and there is nothing wrong with being an amazing graphic designer. She just was like, I like drawing, I like to do cartoons and graphics, I'm going to be a graphic designer. It's very linear in her pathway. And then after working with us and coming on our 2-week program to San Francisco, where she got to understand how creativity connected with technology and how easy it was to access some of these new tools, she started applying her interest into the space of virtual reality, augmented reality, that kind of thing. And she has now since built incredible campaigns for the Australian Open, for MasterCard. She's worked for Google, Adobe, Atlassian. And she's just this incredible young woman who now teaches back to other people these skills that she's picked up. And to me, that is just an example of how you can kick someone's career from being linear into being exponential.
Yeah.
And that's like a story that I'm so proud of.
Absolutely.
And the other thing is, I could talk forever about my alumni, but we did some research actually on the outcomes of the alumni after they've understood what's possible, and 1 in 5 of them have actually become entrepreneurs or social impact entrepreneurs, and of those 1 in 5, half of them have hired other people. So we're talking legitimate economic growth as a result of learning about entrepreneurship and innovation at an earlier age.
That's incredible.
So for any investors out there, like, this is what you need. We need this pipeline, right? So we need this pipeline to come earlier.
100%. So how did you make the pivot from corporate world to becoming an entrepreneur?
Yes, it was gradual.
Yeah.
And I think many entrepreneurs that have kind of done that sidestep or that pivot will look back and go, there were little signs. It's like there were signs. There were signs I wasn't going to stick around for the long haul. And I would always do little silly things at work, like bring in people for lunch and learns that weren't to do with the bank. Or I did an event called the Gingerbread Demolition with my partner, where we raised money for charity by smashing giant gingerbread houses. Just, silly little things that you do on the side to kind of keep your brain engaged and fresh.
Yeah.
But really it was a chance coffee meeting with someone who was visiting from San Francisco. We just kind of brainstormed, like, what if we showed Australian young people the cool stuff that's happening in the Valley? And it was just a very casual chat. And then 6 months later, we're like, why don't we actually put this together and just see if people want to do it?
Right.
And so I'm still working at the bank. We're just kind of doing a bit of a side hustle. RMIT University came on board as our first partner after we had about 30 different meetings with people at RMIT figuring out what is it that universities want. And eventually we went on our first program. It was a study abroad 2-week program, 7 students, 1 entrepreneur residence. I had no idea what to do with them once I got there. But I ended up taking 3 months off work, all of my leave, all of my sick leave, my lifestyle leave, my annual leave, took everything, extended that, did some unpaid leave. And at the end of that, my boss was like, are you coming back? And
They
it's
must really like you. You must be really good at your job because I can't imagine doing that. And then them being like, yeah, no problem, come back.
it was honestly like when you look at the people that impact your journey, there's always going to be someone who you're like, without this person, couldn't have done it. So I always shout out to that manager. But I ended up going back part-time, and then I'm going to say weaned myself off until I was confident enough that the business would make at least a little bit of money to pay me maybe something in the future.
So you're not going to be homeless.
That was kind of it was a weaning off thing, because when you do this after you've got, mortgages and you're an adult and you're trying to live an adult life and you've been used to a corporate salary, it's really difficult to kind of just go, and all of a sudden I pay myself nothing.
Yes.
And so I like mad respect to anyone who does do that, because it's a big mindset shift. It's a big personal financial shift. You have to convince your partner and people that it's a good idea. And so, it was a process. It was probably a 9-month process to go from corporate to startup founder across that journey.
This is why you look at it, and I don't think a lot of people consider that when they approach entrepreneurship, is that it's a huge financial outlay that you're going to have to undertake. Yeah. And it's like you're saving up to not work.
It's nuts. And thinking about runway, right? You think about your personal runway.
Yes.
How long can I afford to do this before I need to go back and do something? And the way I thought about it was, what is my absolute worst case scenario if I get to maybe 4 months down the track, I don't make any money? Can I freelance? Can I get a junior marketing job? Can I go and temp somewhere? Like, you really start to think down to like, what are my worst case scenario options?
Yeah.
And I think that mindset has actually permeated into the way I run the business, because you bring that kind of bootstrapped mindset into management and going, okay, well, what risks can I take? How much runway do I have? What's my worst case scenario? And making choices that way.
It's an interesting concept, because I never really considered the personal runway, because I always have that discussion with people who want to raise funds with Virtual, and I say, what's the business's runway? But that's such a good point, because you don't consider it. I don't think a lot of people do, and a lot of people come into the business and I'll say offer documents, and within their use of funds is the salary for whoever's the founder or whoever's building up the company, and say, it's a tricky one, because a lot of investors are going to say, why are you paying yourself such a large salary at such an early stage? I don't know how you'd approach that one, because a lot of entrepreneurs are going into it, they're throwing their whole life into it. They expect that they're going to be able to get some kind of money out of it. But I think what you're saying is you've got to expect that you might not get anything.
You've got to plan for it, I think. It's awesome to be funded, whether it's through Virtual or backers or any other funding. But really, if you're self-funding it from the start and you're completely bootstrapped and you're not taking external capital, which we didn't for 4 years, that's a real personal runway risk. And honestly, not everyone has the risk appetite for it, and not everyone has the privilege for it. And I think some people have different tolerances of, would I go as far as remortgaging my house, or would I go as far as maybe just selling that piece of jewelry, or would I go as far as like not doing any of that, and I don't want to go below this number in my bank account? Like everyone's got a different risk tolerance, and it will come down to their personal situation, right? So every founder who's going to do this journey and do it seriously, I would highly encourage them to think about their personal situation and just be real with themselves about when is it going to get to the point that you can't sleep, or when is it going to just be like, okay, this is a little bit stressful, but we can push through. So those are some really important self-reflection moments that honestly I wish someone told me earlier. But now it's looking back on it was good to be able to share the experience.
I was actually about to say, what's one thing you wish you could go back and tell yourself before starting HEX?
A constant theme in my life about something I wish I could tell myself is just do it earlier.
Okay.
I think I've always waited, like maybe 6 months to a year after I was ready, before I did the thing, because I think I'm always waiting to do one more piece of credibility, one more course, one more network, one more meeting, one more win in the business, and then I'll be ready to do this, and then I'll be ready. And I don't know if this is a trait that others resonate with, but just that feeling of, you've got to do it, you've got to push yourself and take action. it's not that I don't move fast, because I certainly do, but there are big jumps and inflection points that I probably could have done faster and quicker if I had just backed myself a little bit more.
Yeah, right.
And I do look at other founders who sometimes move a little bit quicker in terms of those big moves and that boldness. And I go, well, what is it about the way that they think that allows them to do that? And it might be maybe just a little bit of a detachment from perfectionism or from worrying about being judged.
So that done is better than perfect kind of mentality?
Yeah, that was never how I was brought up. And that's not how we're brought up at school.
Mm-hmm.
Like, we don't get taught that at school.
No, definitely not.
So that's what we're trying to do now, is teach the kiddos that done is better than perfect. And almost every door is a two-way door.
Yeah. I think it's interesting as well, considering it from a female founder's standpoint, is I talk to a lot of female founders, and it is as though they don't have that self-belief behind them to take those big risks and to make those big leaps. Do you find that that might have been what held you back a little bit?
Maybe. I mean, anyone who knows me knows I'm like, I generally back myself. I'm pretty confident. But there is something about putting it all on the line and knowing that people are going to look at you and know and they'll see if you mess up. Like, they'll see it. It's going to be visible. Even just things like recently we announced that we acquired another company, and I was so pumped about it. But the minute it went out to media, I was like, oh my gosh, now everybody knows I've done this. What if I stuff it up? And that's what was
oh my gosh.
Which is such a silly thing to think when you've just done this amazing, piece of work for your business. So I think these are just the personal, I won't say demons, but the personal things that people work through about every founder's going to have their own challenges.
For sure.
And these are mine. These might be others as well. Yeah.
I don't think you're alone in them, and there's that imposter syndrome element of, building your own business, and there's a lot of people that you don't want to let down, and often it's the people who, have contributed to the business or who rely on the business for something. Those are the ones you don't want to let down rather than yourself. Interestingly, when I have conversations with male founders, they're always super confident. They think that they've built
they might say they're super confident on the surface, but I wonder how they're feeling inside, a lot of them.
It's a good question. Yeah. Like, it's a good point. Yeah. I think you just see for face value a lot of the time what founders are coming up with and what they're presenting. And bless, when I have the female founders come in, they say, oh, this is a huge responsibility, taking on new shareholders or making this decision. What if I mess up?
Yeah. And I mean, I think this point around, and maybe there is some generalizations around the way that we've been socialized to take care of people or to make sure that we're carrying responsibility. Well, but I also just think it's a different kind of leadership. People can come to the world and come into business with different styles of leadership. My style is I'm very focused on taking care of my team. I do feel a sense of responsibility to my investors because I want to make a return, because I want to have generational change in this business. So for me, burning for the sake of burning and for the sake of show is not my leadership style. It's not aligned with my values. My values are like build an awesome, game-changing, generationally changing business that returns great things for all the people involved. And I think that's my style. It doesn't mean I have smaller ambitions. It means I'm going about it in a way that I think is maybe a little bit more people-focused. And I mean, there are statistics to say that female founders return more per dollar of investment than our counterparts. So I think investing in women and being a female founder that raises, we're an undervalued asset class.
No doubt.
So just because we don't necessarily look, smell, sound the same as the ones that go out there burning heaps and making a lot of noise, it doesn't mean we're not building something incredibly valuable. So I would just, for investors out there, and I know this is a big topic of conversation, just think about diversifying your asset portfolio to include amazing female founders or female-led businesses, because we are an undervalued asset class that are going to give you a better return on your dollar.
Isn't that wild that statistically female founder businesses do return better, and yet statistically they're significantly less invested in? Why is that?
I mean, I think at this point we all know the issue. I think the challenge has to be laid back squarely at the feet of people making investment decisions. I mean, you can't argue with those stats or those statistics. I think pattern matching is still a problem when it comes to particularly venture capital investing. But maybe also, I think we're done trying to fix women.
Yeah.
I think we're done trying to change the way women run businesses and the way we present. I think we're ready to admit that women run awesome businesses and treat people in the way that we want to run our teams. And I think we got to put the reflection back at the feet of investors and the people in the room making those calls.
100%. So you said that when you started the business, you went for 4 years without taking investment.
Yep.
What was your decision making behind getting investment at that point, and where did you go to get that investment?
Yes, it was an interesting. This is probably one of those moments where I was thinking about, was I ready to raise capital before I raised capital? I probably was, but I didn't because I didn't necessarily need to. We were self-funded, we were bootstrapped, we were doubling year on year. I was having a lovely time running my business. But at the very start, we had our main product was international study programs. So we were running study abroad programs all around the world with universities around the world. And then we all got locked down for 2.5 years, right?
Yeah.
So all of a sudden I have 1 month of runway in the bank. I have a team of 6, still small, but I have no idea if any revenue is coming in for the next 6, 12, 18, 24 months.
Yikes.
We still did not raise at that point, I will tell you. We did a little bit of like family and friends, like, can someone just throw me like 5 or something to help me out in this like short term so I can pay my team? And then we hustled. We hustled to get our customers to pay us to do different things.
Okay.
So we still did not raise from 2020 until the end of 21. We went 2 years in the pandemic as a travel business, not raising and growing. And that to me is still one of my biggest resilience stories. So when it came to the end of 21, and obviously there was a little bit of a frothy edtech market at the time, we were like, well, maybe it is time to build something.
Yeah,
to actually take all this tech that we've been gluing together and doing our best to, deliver value to our customers. Like, do we actually build something now? So that's when we went out to market to say, I think we've got an idea that is worth investing in. And our leads were Giant Leap Venture Capital, so Impact VC.
Okay.
We'd been friends for a while. I'd sort of been keeping them in the loop for a few years, mostly because I had a tip from one of their partners who said, we don't invest in dots, we invest in lines, so keep us in the loop. So that was a wonderful tip from Rachel Yang at Giant Leap. And so they're our lead investors. We then brought on some wonderful syndicates, including Aussie Angels. We were the first on their platform. We brought in scale investors, the incredible people who invest in women founders, and also the Alice Anderson Fund through LaunchVic. So that was kind of the core group. There's a few individual partners. Didn't hang out at Birchall just yet, but hey, you never know in the future. But that was our round, and that's all we've done so far. So we've been self-funded since then afterwards.
And what was your approach to negotiating deals in terms of getting that investment? Is this something that you had experience in previously, or was it all brand new to you and you were having to understand, terms of deals and all those kinds of things? I
mean, I'd done as much as I could in terms of educating myself prior to this. So I did, I don't know if you know Arlen Hamilton from Backstage Capital. She was doing a course, so I signed up for that. Woke up at 4 a.m. to join her American-based course because I think she's a legend. I did the VC Catalyst at Wade Institute. Like, I educated myself as much as I could to kind of figure out the terms. But if you don't do deals every day, it's still your first time.
For sure.
So no matter how many books you read or courses you do, the minute you're in negotiations, you're just like, oh God, I don't know what any of this means. I remember having one angel who was ready to give me money. She goes, what do we do? And we looked at each other and we're like, neither of us knew what to do. We're like, oh, okay, we have to do I have to get a lead? What's that? What do I do now? And we just were laughing. We actually had a coffee recently and just laughed about how neither of us knew what to do, but we knew we wanted to do business. We knew we wanted to do a deal. And so, I will give a lot of credit to the Giant Leap team for being very open and collaborative and educational in the way we did the deal. And I think that kind of approach to investing is another good way to get a more diverse group of founders into your portfolio, is to don't deliberately seek to overwhelm. If you want them in your portfolio, if you want to do the deal, then be respectful, treat them like humans, understand it's an uneven market of information
Yeah.
and understand the privilege that you have with like doing them all the time versus never.
So what's your advice for founders trying to get investment and they don't understand all this? There's a lot of jargon out there.
So much jargon.
Crazy terminology. And often investors do throw in a lot of confusing jargon on purpose to kind of throw the founder off their game and get the deal terms that they want.
Yeah. There are times to skimp on getting advice, and this is not one of them. Like I would just say, like, make sure that you do speak to other founders is good. If you've got trusted advisors who are investors, don't be afraid to run them past it as well. Definitely get a lawyer to look at it. Like it's just not the time to make hasty decisions that could, bite you in the butt later.
Yeah.
Just seek as much advice as possible, I'd say. And it's okay to ask if you don't understand what something means. Hopefully your investor isn't going to make you look stupid if you go, what actually does like this liquidation preference mean in reality? And the way I like to think about it is give me a scenario when this would be kick in. So I always like to ask my lawyer, like, tell me a story about when I'm going to need to use this clause, because then I can imagine the conversations I might have with the person I'm fighting with or the person I'm trying to negotiate with. And that helps me understand where I would actually draw that line as a human versus as a contract.
Right. So did you feel as though the barriers to entry for you getting investment was your knowledge around that, or were there any other barriers? Did you find that you were having lots of coffees and meetings and conversations that never came to fruition, or were you quite lucky in the sense that, when you had those conversations, they actually had an outcome?
Yeah, that's a great question. Our round was pretty quick. I think I had my first official conversation in maybe, I'm going to say like September, October, and we had money in the bank by January. Like it was a tight round.
That's unheard of.
But I had been active in the ecosystem for 4 years. I'd been showing up to events. I'd been having those coffee meetings before I was raising. And so this is what I mean about building relationships and the investors investing in lines, not dots. If you come out of the blue and they don't know who you are, it's much less likely to land well. But if you've kind of demonstrated that you've got some staying power, that you're willing to do the work, that you've been showing them your growth and your activities and your traction over time, when you come to them and say, I'm actually ready now, I'm not going to say it was easy, but it was a easier conversation.
But they're warm, they're engaged.
They're warmer,
Yeah, absolutely.
And I mean, it is definitely one of those things of not underestimating the importance of like what reputation you're building for yourself and your company in the market. I cop some flack sometimes for doing like too many things that seem to be not core business, like even sitting here today or doing events and doing PR. But I think it adds up, and that's soft power, and that's, it all helps.
Yeah, it's interesting what you say about that, because I'm seeing a lot of rhetoric, and mostly it's on LinkedIn at the moment,
I've seen that too.
Yeah, and it's a bunch of investors saying, I wouldn't invest in this founder if they spend all their time at these events and blah, blah, blah. But I go to these events and that's where Virtual finds new founders and businesses, because they're making noise.
That's right.
At the end of the day. And I often say, when I ask for key traction, I say, have you won any awards? Is there anything that we can really speak to show that, other people believe in you and your idea? And so I do think that those kinds of things are valuable, but I'm not sure why.
It's an interesting rhetoric.
Yeah,
I've seen it as well. And I would almost just challenge the people who think like that and say, well, who's to say I'm not doing all the other work as well as doing this? Maybe I'm just working twice as hard. Like, just because I'm having these events or media or whatever, it doesn't mean I'm not talking to my customers. And so I think, maybe I don't know if it's a tall poppy syndrome thing. I don't know if it's I just want to say something to get the reacts on LinkedIn thing.
Yeah.
But I would just say, like, there's nothing wrong with earned media, with earned PR, with earned awards. If your business is up for those, like, and if you put your business out for those, like, it helps to get revenue, and that is the lifeblood of your company.
Absolutely.
So if I'm in the AFR winning an AFR award for higher education, that helps me with revenue. So why don't investors want that? Like, it doesn't make sense to me. So I would just say, if you're seeing people who are doing well with their customers and doing media, maybe they're just working twice as hard.
For sure. It's an interesting thing. And also there's awards and there's awards,
Totally.
There's completely different
There's
ones.
the ones that you just have to pay to play, and that's a different story, I think. But if you are genuinely on merit, winning things for the impact that your company's making or the growth or your culture, like those are things that are real. And, when people read your bio and it's all a bit embarrassing because it's like squirmy, my mum tells me, she's like, it's not embarrassing if it's true. Like it's not bragging if it's a fact. It's like, yeah, mum, thanks. So I will tell all founders that if you feel awkward about things that you're putting yourself out there for, either as an individual or as a business, if it's fact, that's not bragging. That's just you being good at your job.
100%. I couldn't agree more. And I think telling your story and being authentic in that is so powerful. And I think it resonates with so many people. And if there's relatability in it, but also an ambitious nature of it. So, I mean, obviously reading about you've won a bunch of awards, and it's not even just the business, it's you personally have won those. And when investors are coming to invest in a business, they're not just investing in the business itself or the idea, they're investing in the founder, the team, and the potential, because you really need to be able to trust that founder to deliver on their promises. And I think that that's valuable in itself. So I think that you're doing the right thing.
It's also a talent magnet, right? So if you're out there known as a founder who is recognized for doing certain things, the right people will be attracted to your mission and will want to work for you. That's why we get inbound job applications when we're not hiring. I think any piece of media or some kind of signal, it helps with both customers and talent, both key ingredients in running your business.
How do you go about approaching new talent for your business? So obviously people are coming to you. How do you sift through people and understand who's right for your business?
I mean, we still keep things pretty tight, and I have a weakness for working with young people, and I probably hire too many young people that need to be shaped and molded and mentored, because it's more of a habit and a value of the business. But we're kind of looking for that entrepreneurial drive, right? We're looking for that mindset of someone who will do things that's not necessarily in the written job description, but are hungry to kind of see what else is in the fuzzy edges around the opportunity. I want the people in my team who, during the pandemic when we were locked down and had no revenue, I want the people I can turn to and be like, what do we do now?
Yeah.
And if I meet someone and I don't get that sense that I could turn to them and go, we're in a crisis, what will you do to help us out of this crisis? They're probably not the right fit for me, because they might require too much direct instruction. And look, as the business grows, we'll need different kinds of roles. But as we're still, lean, that's the kind of person I want in my team.
Right. Have you learnt this by having some issues in the past, or you've been lucky?
I mean, I think every founder's done things that they wish they didn't do.
What's your biggest mistake that you've learned from, do you reckon?
I reckon I probably hired too senior after I raised.
Oh,
yeah.
Okay.
I mean, they were great humans, but I probably didn't need them at that level. I didn't need 25 years experience. I probably needed 10,
Right.
And so I think I immediately thought, I've got some money in the bank, and I'm a grown-up business, and I should have grown-ups in the company. And so my instinct was, let's go find very experienced people.
Right.
But they weren't necessarily right for that phase of the business. So I think that was probably something I could have done differently.
That's fascinating. And I never considered that, is going too senior too quickly.
Yeah. It just they were great. They just weren't right for that stage.
Okay.
And so I think and it's also easy to burn on things like that, on those decisions. So I would just say you can get a little bit caught up in the excitement of having some capital in the bank and going, let's do all the things.
I think you see it time and time again with so many startups. They get some capital and it just goes. And then they've got to make redundancies and they've got to do cost-cutting exercises because they've gotten overly excited. How do you approach scaling, but scaling in a sustainable way?
Yeah. I think this comes back to the point I made about a different style of leadership. So if at my core, taking care of my people and understanding that they do rely on my business for their mortgages, their school fees, if that's core to me, then I'm less likely to make decisions like that where I go crazy and scale very quickly, because I will want to protect that core. And so I think, it's really just thinking about what values am I making my choices by? And I think that all of us as entrepreneurs, we have such an amazing power to shape the way that people are treated and to shape the way that businesses run by just these little micro decisions that we make. So if there are founders that bring in a lot of capital and they're like, you know what, let's hire like 30 engineers, like awesome, that's your journey, that's your business values. But if you do that knowing that you might need to cut them in 6 months or 12 months or do something else, like that doesn't sit right for me personally.
Yeah.
Doesn't mean it's not right for other businesses because they might need to flex and scale and stuff. So I totally get it, but it's just, that's my style.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I've kind of gotten a bit more comfortable with owning it, I think.
Yeah, right.
The comparison can be really brutal.
Yeah, I'm sure. Yeah. I think that's where you approach, getting contractors and people that you need for a short space of time versus employing somebody on a full-time basis.
Totally. Yeah. And getting creative as well, like thinking offshore. We've got some team members in Manila, in India, in Vietnam as well. So just thinking about how can we get the job done that needs to be done in a careful way.
We've got team members in Manila as well, and they're absolutely incredible.
Yes.
We're obsessed with them.
So good.
Yeah, I think that if you can outsource in an intelligent way, it can really change your business for the better. So when you're talking to people, and I imagine a lot of people come to you for advice because you're very impressive and you've achieved so much. What advice do you give people who are thinking of jumping out of the plane of their comfortable everyday life and going into the great unknown and starting their own business?
Well, particularly for people that have had a corporate background, the pace is something they need to get ready for. Like the pace of movement, the pace of decision making, and also the pace of action. I think when you've had a long time making PowerPoint decks in middle management and decisions have to wait till you go through 4 steering committees, you kind of sometimes lose a bit of that urgency and edge.
And momentum,
yes. And so I think if you are wanting to jump into the pool of entrepreneurship, being ready to out-act or out-do, the person next to you is crucial.
For sure.
I don't know. I mean, we talked about the money thing.
Yeah.
There's just also that sense of finding the people that are going to help you out. The community is important. I know you guys believe that at Birchall as well.
Definitely.
I think finding the right community, finding a little group chat of founders that you can vent to, or even just a buddy that you want to have a coffee with or a walk and talk, like those are really crucial. And I don't think I would have done anything I've done today if I didn't just have a little handful of those people who were there at the right time for the right conversations.
It's funny what you say about that, the pace for startups. Obviously, Birchall is a startup working with startups. And it's so funny. We get so impatient if there's a change that's getting blocked by something, whether it be, a product update that needs to happen or a process update. And then I talk to my friends who are in corporate and they say, oh, you have no idea how many people things have to go through to change. It's months and you just have to be patient with that. So I don't know how you do it.
It's nuts. And do you know what's really difficult is this actually then impacts like the flow-on effect for startups is if they're working enterprise and they're selling to enterprises, those decisions impact startups as well. So for example, we work with universities. They're our major partners. We love them very much. We kind of think that we're like their friend that gives them a elbow in the ribs to say, guys, your shirt's out of date kind of thing. But we work together beautifully. And I think it's tricky because people that we work with in those sectors have to wait months, years, sometimes for things they're planning for 2027. Whereas we're just like, what is happening next week?
Yeah.
And so one example, which is that we had to wait about 2 years for a decision from the University of Sydney to give HEX programs academic credit for all of our programs.
2 years.
2 years. So it's like a 2-speed model. Like we're doing this. Like we're working really fast. We're trying to do more deals. We're trying to sell to more customers. Meanwhile, there's this slow overarching process of figuring out, because we identified that as being a game changer for our company. So if we get this school of record, that opens up Asia Pacific, that opens up, different markets for us. So luckily I have people in my team that have that patience and that tenacity to continue those conversations and go through the steering committees while the rest of the team is smashing out everything else. And so I think depending on what kind of business you run, you might have to end up with that sort of 2-speed model patience, especially if you're trying to change an industry that does move that slowly.
Yeah,
and honestly,
sure.
this is partly why we exist, Because if things do move that slowly in schools and unis, the kids aren't getting what they need.
Yeah.
They're not getting what they need right now. So if we can come in as a trusted partner and go, cool, like you need to do your curriculum, that's fine, but how about also this?
Yeah.
And then they can get the credit, they get exposure to industry. I mean, yesterday we took a group of young women from who were year 11. They got to meet social entrepreneurs, graduate recruitment people, consultants, big banks, women in tech. Like we took them to meet these individuals to say, this is the world of work as you're making your VCE decisions and things.
Yeah.
You know, that's not something that their school necessarily could put into curriculum that quickly. So, yeah.
I'm so jealous of these students that get this. I never had this and I never had any idea what I was going to do. I did a Bachelor of Performing Arts.
Did you?
Obviously, the acting career was not successful.
Destined to be on stage and screen?
Yeah, but I'm really lacking in talent. And I think
that's a problem I've heard.
Yeah, it is key. So didn't have that. And my mum was severely disappointed. I mean, imagine putting your child through private school and then they're like, I want to be an actor. And she was like, sweet Lord, this is such a bad idea. And after that, I had no idea what I was going to do, obviously, because I thought I was going to be famous. And I was like, no worries. No.
Amy, I see cameras pointing at you right now. So I think you've almost fulfilled
I like
your dream.
to yap, you know. I think that's why this podcast exists, is because I love to have a chat.
Love it.
So, and also like I love hearing people's stories and sharing them. And I think that that's a really important part of the startup ecosystem is hearing other people's stories, getting inspired, and then learning how you can start your own journey.
100%, yes. And like this is kind of what, you know, one of the things we tell students is you have to imagine that you're wearing a suit made out of Velcro and people are going to throw things at you all day long. But at the end of the day, it's your choice to like brush yourself off and go, this sticks, that sticks, but this doesn't. That's not for me. Because there'll be things that I say on this podcast that people will listen to and be like, nah, not for me. That's cool. That's your journey. And I've also, sorry, just hit the microphone.
You're fine.
I've also listened to, you know, my share of podcasts and TikToks and whatever. And there are things that you go, that sticks, I'll keep that one. That one doesn't. And I think for young people, it's really just about giving them the opportunity to see what else is out there in a safe way, so they don't feel like they're going to fall behind at uni or fall behind at school in a way that's endorsed, I guess, by the system, but is showing them what's outside the system and also giving them a chance to learn about jobs and career paths, and not just the jobs, because they'll change. It's about what are the capabilities they need to be awesome. So we talk about this thing called exponential intelligence, a set of capabilities where you're ready to be a great future leader. It kind of sits next to IQ and EQ. So XQ, I keep hitting the microphone, sorry. But yeah, we think that if we can teach exponential intelligence capabilities at a young age, then they will leave school or uni ready for whatever's next. That's very exciting.
Honestly, it's been so great to chat with you. I feel like you're so inspirational as a founder, and you're not just creating something that benefits you or your team, it's benefiting the future generation of human beings and what we want to see in the world. So I'm very grateful for people like you. I wish I could be more like you, but the entrepreneurship thing, very scary, very terrifying. So
very scary. But you know what? We're here because we want to just help people build the world they want to live in, and we're doing that through the system of education. And so, really, it's been great to have a chat. And thank you for all the reflective questions. Definitely
it's my pleasure.
A little deep there in a few moments. So you do have
that's
talent.
my job.
Your talent was to like get that.
People like to share the secrets, and that's my thing. Usually, it's like in the bathroom at the club, but then at least here, it's a bit more meaningful, and you're going to remember it the next day, hopefully.
Yeah. I can also share secrets in other locations, which involve like clubs and bars if you want.
Fab. Like so down for that. I'm so down. Thank you so much for coming on the podcast today. Really appreciate it. And if anybody wants to get involved, how can they reach out to you?
Yes, we are on all of the social channels at Start With HEX, and it's spelled HEX, and startwithhex.com.
Awesome. I'll pop that in the show notes for anybody who wants to reach out. Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you, Em.